You are now watching Believe. Do you believe?
Welcome to an all-new two-part edition of Tackling a New Kingdom. I am your host, Tank Johnson, and today we have an amazing show. We talked to the NFL Commissioner Roger Goodell about player safety and if the new rules benefit just the offense or does the defense get a little bit of love too? Let's jump right into it. Before we bring on our guests, I had some concerns, right? As a former player, as an old dog, as they say, when we were making these changes to the game, I was not sure if our game would completely change. It would look like powder puff football that we see in our high schools, and ultimately, would the offense have all the advantages? The way that I see it, and I will preface this as a former defensive player, I find the rule changes to be a lot more difficult for the defensive side of the ball to adjust to. Obviously, we are reacting to what the offense is doing, and that leads us to be a little bit more kind of fast and playing a little bit more bang football, whereas offensive players are setting us up with moves, and we're just reacting. And so I just wanted to know if there was a possibility, or are they really considering the stress that it's putting on defensive players, defensive coordinators, and just that side of the ball in general. When I look at being 40 years old now, right, turning 41 this year, a lot of my friends who I played ball with, now I'm seeing them into their 40s. And I am seeing that my friends who had really high impact collisions over and over, that those safeties, those running backs, those linebackers, I'm seeing the challenges. I am. And it's not in everybody, but the challenges are there. And, you look at some of these guys, they were fearless. They were put on a pedestal for their fearlessness. This guy would run at a Mack truck without slowing down. And that was something that we honored in the previous generation. And when you're seeing those guys nowadays having mood swings, concentration issues, remembering issues, memory loss, and even mood, just really temperamental. When you look around and see it, okay, he played that position, he played that position, he played that position, and they all three have some of the similar symptoms. I believe it became easier for even guys like me, even if you had to say it in a dark room by yourself, that these new rules are going to save some lives. I know that it's a hard position to move off of, but if you've got any type of compassion in your heart, which I know we all do, we know that it's the right thing. And not to mention, as we've seen our game go through these changes, we still have the best game in the world. Professional football, college football, on down to Friday Night Lights. That football is an amazing game. And although our numbers are changing at the Pop Warner levels, the percentage of kids joining football may be slightly down, our game is still amazing. We have a generation of the sons of legends coming behind us, and they're being taught to play this game in a new way. And if for the longevity of the game, and the longevity of these kids' minds and bodies, if a couple tweaks need to be made, then I'm all for it. I'm all for it. And so you talk about that, and you talk about even some of the different pieces of equipment, we'll call it, that are rolling out. I'm talking about the little beehives that the guys are wearing. That what the fuck? Ooh. People, y'all could have came to me, and I would have put something together better than that shit. I mean, good. That thing is hideous, and I feel like, and I was just listening to the players. My question is this: do you wear that helmet, the honeycomb helmet protector, and then is it a situation like leather? Like the more you hit, the less susceptible you are to these injuries. And so if you wear a pillow over your head throughout training camp where you're supposed to be kind of getting the leather, and all of a sudden you go into the game, is there like a drawback? You know what I'm saying? Like, is there a situation where maybe you need in a smaller dose some of that to acclimate yourself to full speed? Because that's always the issue, the complaint, right? It's like, well, if we taper back too much in the training camp and change the rules significantly, when we get to live bullets, is that going to cause more injuries and more things to go wrong when we're playing for real? I always know I have not had a coach that one time that has been of the mindset that we can show up on first day of the live games and tackle well and block well, have timing, and then the quarterbacks and receivers, and the running backs not fumble. I just don't know if those two things will balance out. Like Roger doesn't hold back. He talks about these changes. He talks about the way that they look at it from a competition committee standpoint. Without further ado, I'd like to introduce to you Roger Goodell. All right, welcome to Tackling a New Kingdom. I'm your host, Tank Johnson, and today we have a good one. Today we have the most powerful man in U.S. sports. He is a semi-pro golf coach to the stars. He's my friend and NFL Commissioner Roger Goodell. Roger, how you doing, man?
TJ, I love that one. I've been watching more of your golf videos than anybody else, and you're making real progress.
So. Hey, well, thank you, Coach. I'm glad that man, it's a tough game, but I'm getting better. So it's good to have someone to send my videos to.
You're definitely getting better. Keep at it.
Nice. All right. And so today we're going to tackle something current. We're going to tackle something real between us. And then we're going to tackle something a little controversial. And for starters, we're going to tackle something current. And as I was leaving the game, I saw changes being made to ensure the safety of the game that I'm not sure that I was an early fan of, to be honest, Roger. But can you speak to the way a different approach in playing the game has made our game safer?
Yeah, and listen, you weren't alone in that, TJ, as you know, of the changes in the game. I think it was one of the big challenges for us was, one, changing the culture, and two, convincing people that this really was good for the game and that we could make the game safer and better at the same time. And a large part of that was on the basis that we saw there were techniques, that there were advances we could make in equipment, there were things that we could do with the rules that we were confident would make our players safer. And that was our starting point. And it could reduce injuries, it could reduce impacts, it could reduce potential long-term impacts. And, you know, for that, we wanted safety was our number one priority. But we also had to see how did that impact the game ultimately.
Right.
And from a competitive standpoint, and people thought, hey, you're taking the contact out of the game or you're taking the hitting. And as you know, the game is still, these guys are faster and bigger and stronger, and the impacts are. And so anyone who wants to say the game is soft, I think hasn't been out on the field, right?
Right.
And so it's still a really physical game. I think people love that. But I think we've been able to take techniques out that we see by looking not just at videos, but analyzing that and looking at the injury data to see that those really do create injuries that we could avoid. And that's on both sides of the ball. And I know, TJ, you probably bring up as a defensive lineman, okay, yeah, this all helps the offensive player. I would disagree. I'm going to get ahead of you on that one if you are going there.
Yeah, let me know.
You were going to go there anyhow, right?
Yes.
Yeah, but you would tell me, and you've said to me many times, even when you were playing, hey, I'm cool if I can protect myself. If I have a chance to see it and know that I can protect it. So chop block was one that we talked about for decades, right? Yes. And one that you would say, hey, I'm looking to go for the ball carrier or the quarterback, and I get somebody who's chopping me and I can't see him, or I can't defend against that. So we've taken that out and made that safer. You know, I would also argue a lot of the changes that people might perceive were protecting an offensive player, like the hit to the head on a reception. We saw the defensive player get hit and injured almost as much as the offensive player because of using that incorrect technique. Yeah. So we don't think that just protects the offensive. You know, we think it's both sides of the ball, protects the player ultimately. Yes. Yeah. So that's why I think, you know, I think over the years that culture changes occurred where people recognize this is for safety and that we can still make this game incredibly popular. And I think we've proven that. And that's a credit to the players and the coaches, our competition committee, our medical teams for being able to take all the data and make the game safer.
Yeah, no, I mean, listen, I have, you know, I guess been around long enough to, you know, have an opinion on it and move off of that opinion based on the game. We still have the most beautiful game. It's like you said, it's played at a high level, and I don't think we've had any drawback in competition. And watching my former teammates, you know, we're all in our 40s now, and seeing how, you know, one mindset of playing football, if you change it, the longevity of the human being could be much better off. Correct. And so, I think a lot of us old dogs are moving off of that position. But I gotta say, of all the bright ideas that I call you with all the time, and I call you with all type of shit, right? I'm just like, how's this? How's that? And I get the answer, you know, we got to add value, TJ. How did those new honeycomb helmet protectors get past your desk, my friend? How did that get past your desk?
I knew you were coming up with that, and I'd like to see you with one of those Guardian caps.
If I should sleep in it so I don't give myself a concussion.
You know, as you know, some version of those Guardian caps go back into, I think, roughly the 90s. Mark Kelso wore them in Buffalo back in the 90s. And we were concerned about the use of some versions of this because would it cause another injury? There was a stickiness to that, and could it potentially cause a neck injury? So we've been studying this for a long time and trying to find something that we were comfortable would add protection to avoid not just concussions, TJ, but actual head impacts that, accumulation of those head impacts, potentially can either have impacts on whether you're more susceptible to an injury later in the season, or, to your point, long-term health of the individual and the player and the person, more importantly. So this has an ability to reduce those impacts by at least 10%. If both players are wearing it, 20%. And, listen, someone said, a lot of players have said, I feel a little goofy in it. It doesn't look right. I get that. But I guarantee when during our early years, when we first introduced helmets and when we modified those helmets to what I would consider more similar to where we are today, people probably thought they looked goofy then too. The reality is this is being done for the safety of a player. It's really required through the second preseason game. Nice. For certain positions where those impacts are happening: offensive line, defensive line, tight ends. In those, we'll see what the impacts are. The early data that we have already looks like it's having a very positive effect on head impacts, but there's a lot more data for us to look at. But, it goes back to that point, and it too, people, used to choose their helmets by how well they looked, right? It was called the mirror test, right? Do I look good? Right?
Do I look mean?
Yeah. Do I? Yeah. And I get that, but we've done a lot of work to prove that we can build a better helmet that's safer. Nothing is 100% guaranteed, but they have a very positive impact on reducing the impacts, and very likely, obviously, concussions. And we've seen a 25% decrease in concussions across the board. Yeah. And that's been consistent for 3 years now. So we're now looking for the next phase of what can we do to not just continue to reduce the head injuries, but also other injuries. So we're applying the same approach to the lower extremity injuries. So, which, as you really probably cause more missed time than anything, whether they're strains or tears, in the lower leg injuries. That's what we really think we can also make a big impact on.
Yeah, no, I mean, I was one of those guys when we switched from the traditional Riddell helmet to the more revolutionary. I remember for about 3 or 4 years straight, I took my helmet home in the off season so the trainer couldn't switch my shit with that new one. So I was one of those guys. But listen,
you weren't alone, TJ.
Oh, good. It's good to know. It's good to know. Well, I'll give you a pass for health and safety because as an old dog now, it does mean something to me. It means a great deal to me. And finally, do we just watch the game to like lead us and guide us, to let us know if there are more changes to be made? Because, the changes are coming on. I don't know if they're coming on rapidly. I think they're coming on at a good pace. But, for example, do we just kind of see where we are right now to know how much further we need to go in player safety? Is that we just look at the data?
Yeah, one of the great things that I think, and gets probably not enough credit in the context of this, is the data. So we used to get injury reports, and they were basically what was reported, prior to a game, and there wasn't as much, in my view, as much medical focus as there probably should have been. Now, those reports are coming from the medical staffs of each team. And they're based off of medical evaluations of an individual and their injury. So we not only have when the injury occurred, how significant the injury is, the length of rehabilitation, we have video that we can match up against that. And so that database is helpful in a couple of ways. First, it helps identify areas where we think we can have an impact. Okay. And so the Guardian Cap's a good example of that. Or a rule change. We're seeing injuries. One of the big things is today, the training camp period. How do we acclimate players and progress to the point where they're playing full contact and ready for a season? As you know, sometimes coaches would say that first day of contact, they go out and, you'd have double sessions in a day. You would have a lot of contact. We limit that contact. All clubs are, and we monitor that contact. And the Players Association has been our partner in that, along with the 32 clubs. So I think we've been able to make significant changes to modify the rules, to modify our policy, modify the equipment. And the data now then helps us evaluate, did it work? Sure. Do we see a reduction in injuries? Or did it cause an unintended consequence of some type? So I think that data has been at the core of driving that. And we will always continue to focus on what changes should be made, either from a safety standpoint, which is something we've had over 50 rules, I think, in the last 10 or 15 years that have all been focused on safety. And then we also believe that, how do we make rule changes that are going to make the game more exciting, more competitive? How do we improve officiating? There's a lot of things that we will work on to use technology that can help us, like an instant replay.
Yeah, no, as a player who, prided myself on the era that I played in, it was about toughness, and it was about we were trained by other tough guys. Like, I am even more happy to see that, one, our game is not suffering and our players are suffering less with those type of injuries. So thank you. That is tackling something current.
Hey, TJ, let me just make one point on that one. I think that's where the culture change comes in, is this tough guy thing. Is that it's not a tough guy thing to play through a concussion, which could lead to a more serious injury. It's not a tough guy to play with an injury that could be more damaging. I think players are so aware of their bodies. They're so focused on that, that, getting proper medical care at the earliest intervention is actually going to make them healthier ultimately and allow them to play. So I think that's the culture change that's happened. If you were playing with somebody in the defensive line and he doesn't feel right, whether it's a head injury, we're not asking the player to make a medical evaluation. We're asking to say, hey, my teammate here, I don't think something's right. Get medical care and get off and see the medical personnel. And as you know, we have more and more medical personnel on the sidelines than when you played by a long shot. I think we have 32, at least on an average, 32 medical personnel on the sidelines in any given NFL game.
Yeah. No, and I'm telling you, man, like I said, if watching my friends and teammates who play the game a certain way and seeing some of the challenges that they have, like I'm all for it. I think the guys from my era are now championing this new modern era of safer play, and I think it means a lot to us in the long run. So I appreciate it.
And more importantly, the next generation too, right?
Yeah, that next gen is super important. So we got to say, the science was correct. That is part one. Wow, the unprecedented access to the commissioner's office, to just the thought process behind why things are changing in the games, and just the answers behind it. Stay tuned for part two, where we discuss how did two unlikely guys like us become friends, and this iteration of the personal conduct policy, why is it better than the one he had when we first came into the league, where he was the end-all be-all. He was the sheriff with the gavel. He made all the decisions. In part two, we are going to cover all of that. Stay tuned. Tackling a New Kingdom, coming at you fast.
Thank you for watching Believe. You can find more great content at Believe.com. That's BLEAV.com. Do you believe?